I will take a quick question with Ramesh Abhishek. And Mr. Abhishek, India seems to have done well, like both Mohit Saraf and Sandeep Parekh insist we have. Of course, a long way to go on enforcing contracts, and that's where judicial reforms come in. But the World Bank seems to be a little worried about the fact that it is perhaps not being done in a timely bound manner. And the whole exercise was envisaged with the idea that this is going to be done in a snapshot, 120, 180 days, those kind of deadlines were being worked with, but of course then came in the interventions. Can you address that concern at all, Mr. Ramesh Abhishek?
You know, this improvement from 136 to 103 has happened this year because finally, after so many decades, we have a insolvency and bankruptcy code in the country. It has been fully implemented in the last 1 year. Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India, NCLT, NCLATs. I must say that the speed with which this has been implemented is very remarkable. In any other country, this would be given the due credit that it should. What World Bank has factored into this year is having this code, having very positive provisions, so that secured creditors are given preference over even government dues and so on. But next year, when finally the cases are disposed of by the NCLTs, then we will see the real impact on the ranking, and we expect this to improve much more once the resolution of these cases happen in NCLT next year.
Oh, absolutely. And the resolution on the cases won't just improve our ranking, it will also help resolve the NPMS to a great extent. But Mr. Arun Kumar is also joining us right here. And before I come to you, I'll take a quick question on some of the fault lines that exist with Mr. Dua right here. And Mr. Dua, the fault lines perhaps exist with starting business. We've gone from 155 to 156, very marginal slip, but a slip indeed. Electricity connection, we've gone from 26 to 29, and registering property, where we've gone from 138 to 154. My larger question is that for businesses to flourish and for businesses to matter, this is what is very, very important on all those three counts. But how much will you blame the central government for this? Because my own presumption is that a lot of this lies in the realm of the state governments.
This particular index, ease of doing business, measures the situation on the ground. Some of these might be within the purview of the federal government, but many, at the cutting edge are the provincial governments, their municipal corporations and their revenue authorities in the districts. It is not a question of the state government being blamed or the central government getting the credit. The central government, as a nodal agency, is coordinating the efforts of everybody. The fact of the matter is, yes, there is need for centralizing some of these monitoring issues, not taking away powers per se, and I think that's what DIPP and the Prime Minister's office, which has been overseeing this, has been concerned about. The central government has been writing to the state governments, has been in touch with large municipal corporations like the one in Mumbai. So unless progress is made not only in lawmaking but also its implementation, we would not see similar increases, similar improvements in the future. But making the laws, making the regulations is a starting point, and that's what the World Bank has recognized when it says that in the last 15 years, South Asia has seen over 100 reforms, major reforms concerning these 10 fields in which it monitors the ease of doing business, and there it gives credit to India for being responsible for as many as 37 of these.
Okay, I've got two very special guests joining us right here, and I've got Mr. Arun Kumar and I've got Arvind Virmani right here. And Dr. Virmani, thank you very, very much for being with us, and thanks very much patiently as we tried to get the technical glitch sorted and come to you. How impressed are you with India jumping up those 30 notches? Did you see it coming? Do you believe we now have the potential to break into the top 75, top 50 club because we've climbed up 30 notches in just a year? And do you, like a lot of others here, also believe that this is a big achievement given how diverse and complex as a country we really are? Dr. Virmani.
So there are many issues, so let me start with some of them. The most important point here for me is in terms of credibility. You know, in 2014, when they said that they would try to go to 50, there were only a few cases, some of which I pointed out, others pointed out, like Saudi Arabia and etc., who had focused on this particular index and been able to make a big jump. But as we saw last year, there was not much change, so there were doubts beginning to arise. So those doubts have certainly now been very clearly and decisively been removed, and therefore this will add to the credibility of the government when it says that we are going to and we are continuing to improve the ease of doing procedure. So that I think is the most important. Second point, which few people have made, which I'd like to make, is that many large companies, whether they are Indian companies or foreign companies, have their own ways of judging. They have people, they can send people, they can ask other people. But where it makes a big difference is for the small and medium, particularly in countries like Germany and Italy and even in the US, where from which we haven't got higher tech, smaller, more sophisticated companies come in, because they find this reputation of India as a very bureaucratic place very formidable. They are scared of it. So that is an area where I expect it to make the big difference, especially if the government of India makes an effort to communicate these new findings to them. And the third point I would make is with some of the remaining areas, but I can come to that after others have had their say.
Oh, absolutely. We'll keep coming to you in this debate, because it's important to touch upon the specifics as we look at the larger picture as well. But I'm going to take this to Arun Kumar. And Mr. Kumar, one of the things that these ratings are very important is that they give you a sense of the investment climate in the country. If I were to ask you a fair question, is this a marker on the reform process that the government has undertaken in the last 3 years, specifically perhaps in the last 1.5 years, ever since they had the resolve to change things and take us to the top 50 club? Is this a reflection of the investment climate in the country?
No, I think it is definitely a reflection of the resolve that the government has. Before I came back to India to lead KPMG, I was in the US government, the Obama administration. And I recall how US businesses were very focused on the ease of doing business as a metric. I was actually present at Madison Square Garden when Prime Minister Modi declared that India would be in the top 50. So it's very gratifying to see that we've made some substantial progress and reached the 100th rank. The answer to your question is yes, this is an important signal to investors. In fact, there have been some study, I think it was a World Bank study, that sees a correlation between long-term growth in FDI and the improvement in the distance to frontier scores.
Okay. I do want to take a question with Dr. Virmani before I move any further, and just get your views on a topic that we've touched upon briefly while you were joining us, but I do want to talk about that just very quickly. The real reflection, is this the real picture on the ground? I mean, Dr. Kumar is right in saying that it is perhaps closest to what can be, but is this a real reflection? Because this is just Delhi, Bombay. This isn't the rest of India. This is perhaps big corporates that have answered these questions. Is this a real reflection of how things on the ground really are, Dr. Virmani? I mean, how confident are you of this being the real picture?
So, you have, So you have to be very careful. This is a benchmark which is applied to across the world, and we use it, or people use it, others use it, researchers use it, companies use it for a comparative picture. So it's very important to, by definition, a benchmark must be standard. As the World Bank person Junaid has explained, their practice is that they have chosen two cities from every country. That is the benchmark. So what we are talking about here is not whether there's an improvement in every city in the country, but how this country, as measured by this benchmark, is improved. So you cannot go either way. You cannot say that because India has improved relative to X or Y country by 30 points, that every city in the country has improved. Nobody is making that case. So you have to be very careful. But we cannot question a benchmark every time we either like or don't like the results. So you have to be very careful on this.
Yeah, that's a valid point indeed, that this is a benchmark that is being used for countries across those 190 in the list. We can't be complaining just because we are at 100, and we can't be celebrating too much. So not too much credit should be afforded to, and not too much should be taken away. Valid point. But Shomna Kamnani, you know, we've touched upon this also initially, but I want to come back to corporate India, because it looks like corporate India believes that as far as the ease of doing business is concerned, and you know, despite the fact that GST has not been taken into account, we've seen a big jump in paying taxes. 172 was our position last year. We've gotten up to 119. Why do you believe, or why does, by you, I mean, why does corporate India believe paying taxes has gotten easier?
See, I think that a lot of it is because of the PF and all these funds. Many of the taxes for ordinary people, for the payments have all gone online. And I think the more that we move towards online and take out the human element, those are the places where we're going to see greater jumps.
Dr. Kumar, Dr. Arun Kumar, I'm going to talk to you about the GST. It has been lauded in its commentary. The World Bank said GST is a big reform that the country has undertaken, but obviously GST did not meet the June 1st deadline, and which is why GST was not taken into consideration. We rolled it out only from the 1st of July. How big a difference do you think the GST will make in our ratings next year? Because you know, I don't want to be trigger happy and jump the gun and say this is the biggest reform, and so this is going to take us up another 50 notches, because the fact is that the GST on the ground has been disruptive to begin with. It's an important reform, but it has had its share of troubles with Indian industry.
Well, you know, GST does have teething troubles, as any such major transformation will have, but I do believe that you will see significant improvements in our ease of doing business ranking, if not next year, over the next 2 years. Very clearly, the logistics improvement that's going to create, it actually will affect a number of parameters that go into the ease of doing business ranking. So I do believe that we will see the results of this in a couple of years.
Sure, come in, Mr. Dua.
Ease of doing or ease of paying taxes is one of the 10 criteria. This year we made significant improvement, 53 points. Certainly not taking into account GST. Even if we were to improve by as many points next year, unless there is improvement on other parameters as well, we are not going to be jumping 30 points merely because the GST has settled down and the procedural issues have been handled. As of now, it's anybody's guess. A good reform measure, but still work in progress, particularly at the implementation stage, lot of disruption, and the businesses do feel dislocated, particularly the ones who buy out a lot of things from small vendors who are feeling the pinch. And that's where the government and the ministerial group of the GST Council has recommended making it easier for small and medium enterprises going forward. And as was pointed out, this index, this comparative assessment of countries, is as relevant or perhaps more relevant for that segment of the economy rather than for large foreign company, MNCs and large Indian companies.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. Mohit Saraf, you also want to join this debate on that very particular issue. You know, everybody knows that the GST is a very important reform, but it's an even more crucial reform if it is simplified. If those slabs are reduced, if those, you know, those tax rates are rationalized, if more people come under the tax bracket, some of which has not happened really, but I'm presuming that's the trouble that a reform like that undergoes, like Mr. Dua and like Dr. Bhimani and Dr. Kumar were pointing out. But would you want to share just exactly what clients are telling you right now? What is corporate India telling you on the experience with GST? I mean, they say they believe that it was easier to pay taxes before the GST came in, and we've gone up 53 points there. Do you think the picture will be very different next year?
Absolutely. I would say really you have to look at two things. One is a tax compliant company and not tax compliant company. Companies which are tax compliant are generally happy and they are ready and they are not a problem. But I think the companies or the small businesses which were not tax compliant, they are into a lot of disruption. And to that extent, they affect the larger companies which are tax compliant. So it's a process in my view. But actually, if you think a little bit more, that ease of paying tax is so basic that the government receives money. Government wants money. And if you can't pay taxes in time, that government revenues come down, fiscal deficit happens. So that is really a reflection how bad we were 3 years back, that paying tax to the government was so difficult. And today also it's 100 points. So I think the government has to work for itself. And I would see very excited that actually they are moving up the points. And I would say with GST, I think another 50 point on the tax paying should be easy. And again, this disruption is a process, because a lot of people were not prepared. Now we can blame GST, we can blame the regime, but they were not prepared, or they always believed there will be a way out. And now some of the people are realizing there's not a way out, and they have to comply, and this is a disruption. So it necessarily does not complicate matters, but I would say it will simplify the matter. One of the important things which they have is what is the tax net? And I would say definitely GST would increase the tax net, and which will improve our, I would say, ease of doing business.
Up my audio. Okay, Mohit Saraf, that's a valid point indeed. We've celebrated where we have achieved so far, but I think let's talk about the fault lines, because there are some, and those need to be addressed if we were to really get into the top 50, top 75 club. And Shobhana Kamineni, I'm going to begin this point with you and then take it up with Dr. Arvind Virmani and Arun Kumar and Ajay Dua. And this has to do with the three parameters that we spoke about. Starting business, we've slipped marginally a little from 155 to 156. Electricity connections, we've gone down from 26 to 29. And registering property, we've gone down from 138 to 154. Now, all of these are important in a life cycle of a business. These are very important for businesses, really. You know, minority shareholder rights are important for minority shareholders, but these are exactly where the ease of doing business tick boxes are required. And on those parameters, we've kind of slipped. The reality also is that some of that lies in the ambit of the states. I had taken up this question with Mr. Dua, but I'm going to ask you, do you believe it is perhaps because the state governments haven't been able to keep up pace with the central government and its reforms? Shobhana Kamineni.
I think the state governments, you have to give them a lot of credit, that without them none of this would have come together. But it's still the human element, Supriya. As soon as we can start bringing more things online, or just bringing so much out there that, you know, there's no scarcity, those to me are the big ones that will help in, which will help in the next. Because, you know, as you always know, it's that Pareto principle, that it's always, it's easy to get the first 60 or the first 80% is easy. It's the last stretch which is much tougher to happen. And I think that India has done all the big right moves.
Oh, it's always the last mile that lets us down. I mean, the last mile glitch or the last mile connectivity is what counts us in. But Dr. Arvind Virmani, I'm going to the same question to you. While the central government, you know, will have reasons to be proud about this evening because we've jumped up 30 notches, but there are issues that rest in this list, and those issues are very pertinent issues for businesses. Starting a business, getting an electricity connection, registering property, and on all those counts we've slipped a little. I know that the distance to frontier may have also played a role, but the fact is that we have gone down a few notches, and these are strictly in the ambit of state governments. You know, I will ask you the same question. Have state governments let us down, even though there is this competitive federalism that's at play?
So actually, you know, there are three aspects, two of them related to union government. You know, there are two areas where things are in process, insolvency and starting a new business, where I think there will be a natural progression and you'll see the improvement in the next year. There are two areas where I think a lot more work the union government has to do, and I'll come to the state. The two areas for the union government are trading across boundaries. I think there has been no reform either by this government or even the previous government for a long time in the EXIM import-export system, except for this e-governance and filing stuff. So I think there is real need for reforms in the trading, in this cross-border trading. And as has already been pointed out, the paying taxes depends critically on the implementation of GST. There's enough time. You know, you've got to remember that the cutoff point is June, So we've just passed 4 or 5 months of transition. There is enough time if the government is determined to make it much easier to pay GST taxes. So they have to focus on it. On the state side, yes, there are two big problem areas which remain problem areas. One is of course the building contract permits and the registration of property. Now these are the two areas of state which really will require very hard work, because one of the things which my analysis of the economy showed was that there is a whole sector of investment for household in terms of housing and construction and so on, which is getting squeezed. From the top we have all this demonetization, black money processes which are trying to make it criminal to have black money, and on the ground you have these same old processes at the state and municipal level which are trying to squeeze money out of you. So this middle has been caught, and unless we change this bottom, and which involves a lot of work with the states. I think the states have been perhaps praised over much, but they have a lot more to do. So unless we focus on these two areas at the state level, and that also brings the other point which many have kept raising, that the effect on the economy. Solving these two state level problems will have a big effect on investment.
Yeah. Actually, I do want to throw another question to you, and that's a more big picture question. I've just got 5 minutes actually left on the show. So I have a more big picture question, but I'll just get Ramesh Abhishek on this. We are in the top 100 now, and I think we have enough reason to go to sleep and go to bed peacefully this evening. But Mr. Ramesh Abhishek, top 50 by 2019 was the target. Are we on track there?
You know, because of the methodology of the World Bank and their rigor of it, it's very difficult to predict what exact rank changes will happen when. But we are committed to getting to top 50 in near future. It's very difficult to put a timeline to it. But as I mentioned, we have 120 reforms which could not be factored in this year. We want to do 90 more reforms on which the nodal ministries are working. So we are very hopeful and confident that we will make significant improvements in the coming years as well. But it's not feasible to give a number, so that I will not like to commit on that.
Okay, but you know, before I go across to everybody else, I'll ask Mr. Dua this question. We want to be in the top 50 club. We're in the top 100 right now. The government has some 90 odd reforms that it also wants to implement. Considerable, you know, changes have been made. What should the areas of focus be?
The two issues which have repeatedly pulled us down, one are what you call, what you just mentioned, are within the purview of the state and the municipal corporations. That is construction permits, and the second one is getting electricity, the electricity connection. We have certainly improved on the electricity connection somewhat, but registration of property is something which is squarely with the state governments. 138, we have slid to 154th. From cross-border is as a trade is something which we have been trying to do it for a long time, but unless that is done, and that includes our import-export procedures, that also includes the entire logistics industry. The countries which are way ahead of us in this ranking have looked at all these three issues. Registration of property in India is taking an average of 142 days, whereas in certain countries it is probably a tenth of this. Cross-border trade, it increases the cost of doing transactions, business, as well as it kind of you forego opportunities. I would think that the next three issues should be these three, all of which we have slipped during the current year, and construction permits is something which can easily be done online, as has been mentioned repeatedly by the World Bank as well as our own authorities.
Okay, Dr. Varmani, do you agree these should be the focus areas as far as we go forward?
Well, these are the things I outlined just earlier. As I said, the two in the state level are the registration of property and the application, the permits are the most important, and at the union level, the cross-border trade and a couple of others which are already in process. Those are not a problem, but the paying taxes, yes, because as has been very clearly, as the CAs and all know, and there is still a lot of, again, I hate to bring up this phrase tax terrorism, but despite the progress, there is still a pretty long way to go on this particular measure. And I don't mean for the common person. Actually, common person, there has been more improvement than what one hears from the corporate sector on this particular point about ease of paying taxes.
Shobhana Kamaneni, you have a point of view on where should the focus area be, not just to get into the top 50, but also perhaps to improve our ranking further next year?
So I'll give you a great answer for that one. You know that we're in the top 50 for services. So the biggest part of our GDP, we're already in the top 50. And the government hasn't really spoken so much about that. But I read somewhere that we're already in the top 50 for that. But overall top 50 for us to move to that, I think GST will be one of the important elements, because we have to widen the tax base. We can bring that down many more places, and just getting so many of our contracts out, so there's still people find it difficult for new companies when they come in and they have a multiplicity of things that need contracts that need to get executed with the government permissions. So that permitting, if we can get it, if we can get those in place, I'm hopeful that we'll definitely break into the last 50, and that is a great ambition. Given the size of India, I really don't think we should be in that top 10 and all is maybe unnecessary, because businesses will come when there's so if we make it into the top 50, I think that there's nothing to stop India.
You're tempering your ambitions and being pragmatic there, but we'll let Mr. Arun Kumar have the last word quickly on this debate then, and that has to be about the top 50 club. That was the target. Does that look affordable? Does that look within range now? Or does that still look elusive given the size and the complexity of where we are all from?
Well, I think the top 50 club is very doable. I think the increased use of technology for approvals, for information, etc., is going to be a major part of a movement forwards. You can already see in some states where they have online permitting, single window portals, you've seen huge improvements. The second part, I think, is competition between the states. Frankly, as important as the World Bank's ease of doing business ranking is the ranking of states that DIPP does. I think we should really be as focused on how we are ranking our states, because it's going to be the competition among the states that's going to drive up ease of doing business in the country. And that's an area where I see some competitive juices flowing. I see states that have said, if you don't get your approvals within 20 days or 30 days, it is deemed approved. And not only that, whoever was sitting on the file will have a fine every day. So for every day that is sat on the file. So I think the competitive juices of the states will help us move forward.
Okay, so competitive juices of states will perhaps see the day through as far as India's competitiveness on that index is concerned. But thank you very, very much, Dr. Arvind Virmani, Mr. Arun Kumar, Mohit Saraf, Sandeep Parekh, Shobhana Kamaneni, Mr. Ajay Dua, and of course Mr. Ramesh Abhishek for joining us on this very special edition of the show right here on ET Now. India in the top 100 club at number 100 in a list of 190 countries in the ease of doing business. India development debate is up next. Stay right here for that.